Hey good folks, Rambal Avram here for AE Tuts, and in today's tutorial we are going to create a mock-up TV series opening title sequence. Before we start, let's have a quick preview of what we're going to be creating today. Okay folks, here's the workflow we are going to use. First, we're going to add some basic color correction to the sequences. Then we are going to time remap them. Then we're going to track them. After that, add the tracking box. We're going to add the text and connect each single letter to the center of the tracking box with the beam effect via eye expressions. And finally add the light leaks and final compositing. Let's start off with the basic color correction. To keep things in order, I've created a new folder structure called .comps, and underneath it I have pre-comps, render comps. In pre-comps I have a folder for each time-lapse sequence I'm going to use. We are going to start with cigarette. Let's go to assets, and in sequences we have the cigarette, which isn't named cigarette. It's not okay, but we can handle it. Let's create a new composition out of it. We'll call it cigarette 60 frames per second. Let's drop it in our cigarette folder. Let's close out main comp, we don't need to see it anymore. And here we are. Now let's take a quick look at this. We have a 2 seconds .31, and it is 1280 by 1080, which is full HD. It's 60 frames per second, and as you can see it's pretty high in detail, but we are going to manipulate this photo to give us even more of those details pop out, and we are going to use a method called HDR toning. I'm not going to elaborate on it too much. If you would like, you can read about it in Eran Stern's website. There's a tutorial called HDR toning where he explains about it in great details, and it's a great method, very quick, which helps us to get the most out of our footages. So we'll duplicate this layer, and to it we'll add a fast blur effect, and we'll set it to 30. We're gonna add invert, and we're going to add a tint effect. Okay, now we'll set the transfer mode to soft light. Duplicate the first layer once more, place it on top of everyone. We'll set its transparency to 30 and set its transfer mode to hard light. In some cases you might find that linear dodge would work better, or even color dodge, but in my case I would prefer to use hard light for this particular case. And if I'll isolate this photo for a second, you can really see the difference it makes. It really brings out all the details. For an easy workflow, I really recommend you create a preset out of those effects. You can see this middle part here where the cigarette is burning. I would really like it to be a lot more obvious than it is right now. So I would have to create it. Let's create a new solid, Control Y, and the color doesn't matter because I'm going to use a fill effect to get the right tone, and we'll lower the opacity to see what's going on here, and we'll draw a quick mask here. It doesn't have to be exactly precise. The burn mark is going to change over time. Let's fill it out a bit, let's say 20. Let's raise the opacity a bit here. And we do want to feather it just on the x-axis and not on the y. So we'll set the y to 0. Now let me set the y to 5. And feather it on the x like 40, something like that. Let's move the right side a bit forward. Let's add a fill effect, leave it red, and we'll set the transfer mode to hue. So immediately we get this red color burn, which isn't that natural looking. Let's use a bit more darker red, okay. And let's duplicate this once more. We'll set the transfer mode to soft light, and we'll use a yellowish color here. Set the transparency down a bit. Let's move the mask a bit forward and set the transparency a bit lower. And maybe let's set it to linear light. That's much better. And let's raise the X feathering a bit more like it. And let's lower the opacity a bit more. Something like this should be fine. That looks a bit better. Maybe a bit more, maybe like 15 or 20. Yeah, that's more like it. So if we would to compare it to the original sequence, this looks a lot better. You can really see how the details pop out and the burn glow really adds here. Let's move to the drops basic color correction. Once again, I haven't renamed it, shame on me, and create a new composition out of it. We'll rename it to drop 60 frames per second. We'll put it in the right folder, and again let's duplicate this one 2 times, and we'll switch this one to soft light and this one to linear light or linear dodge. Let's go to the presets, and this is layer 2 and this is layer 3, and linear dodge doesn't work too well for me. Let's see how overlay works. Overlay is better. On top of it I'm going to add a nice vignette, dark blue vignette. We'll use an ellipse tool. I really want the eye to focus on the drop. Let's subtract it and hit MM, feather it out and expand it out, and let's drag those in a bit. Okay, something like this, and feather it out even more and expand it out a bit more. Okay, and we'll switch it to soft light, and we'll add another adjustment layer. Ctrl-Alt-Y to add an adjustment layer. We'll rename it to CC, which stands for color correction, and to it we'll add curves. First we'll just add some contrast in, and we'll duplicate it, reset it. I want to make it a bit more bluish than it is right now. Let's take out some of the reds, take out some of the greens as well, and stick out the blues. A bit less of the greens, and this might be a bit too much. I want just a nice blue-red hue, not exaggerated. Something like this, maybe? Yeah, this is fine. Okay, now let's move on to the banana. Making a composition out of it. I remembered to rename this one. So, banana, 60 frames per second. Place it in the correct folder. The HDR toning doesn't always work, or to be exact, it doesn't always yield the best result possible. Let's do it right here. Duplicate 2 times. Let's set the second layer to soft light and the first layer to, let's say, linear dodge. And let's apply the HDR presets. This one is the third layer and this is the second layer. Right? So yeah, it does what it's supposed to do. It brings out the details. But To be frank, this isn't the best result or the result I'm aiming for. So let's delete those and simply color correct it the old-fashioned way. Let's add a nice adjustment layer, Ctrl-Alt-Y, and rename it to CC. We'll add to it levels and just bring in the input white. We'll add curves to add just a bit of contrast. Something like this should be fine. And we'll add vibrance. We'll set the vibrance to 35 and the saturation to 2, maybe even 75. Yeah, that's more like it. And we'll duplicate the curves, set it above the vibrance, and we need to lighten this up a bit. And let's increase the green a bit. Let's take out some of the red, so we get a slightly greenish banana decaying away. Now let's move on to the flower. Here's the sequence. We'll create a new composition out of it. We'll call it flower 60 frames per second and place it in the correct folder. Let's close these up. So now let's do some HDR toning again. Duplicate it 2 times. Search for the HDR presets and let's apply. This is the third one and this is the second one, and we'll set this one to soft light and the third one to linear dodge. In the original footage, the right leaf is almost disappears in the darkness. This HDR toning really brings it out. And I think we can also add some more color correction here. Let's Ctrl-Alt-Y to create a new adjustment layer, rename it to CC, and let's add to it some curves. Add just a bit of contrast here, a little more vibrance. Let's say 25 for the vibrance and 2 for the saturation. We've got 2 more. We've got the sprouting and the tomato plant. Let's see where the sprouting is. This one's the sprouting. Let's create a new composition out of it. Drag it down, make a new composition. We'll rename it to sprouting and drag it to its correct folder. And we need to add sprouting 60 frames per second. And again, from my experience, the HDR toning isn't yielding the result I was aiming for, so I would use just a basic color correction. Ctrl-Alt-Y to make a new adjustment layer, rename it to CC. We'll add, once again, levels, curves, and vibrance, and for those 3 effects I have also a preset, and it's called Fast CC. As you can see, levels, curves, vibrance. The levels is at its default, so I'll just bring in the white input just a bit. The curves is set to give a slight contrast, and the vibrance is too much, so let's set it to 25. I would like to color correct the tomato plant, and then we can move on to TIAM remapping and tracking. Here's the tomato plant, and we'll create a new composition out of it. Rename it to tomato plant, 60 frames per second, and drag it to the correct folder. Here we'll use again the HDR toning, duplicate it 2 times. We'll set this one to soft light, and the third one to hard light. Where's my presets? HDR. Is this the third one? Right? And this is the second one. And as you can see, it brings out the details, but we have a small problem here. We have a small bluish halo, and you can really see it at the beginning here. And to get rid of it, we are going to key out the black area, the black and blue area. To do that, we'll create a new adjustment layer, Ctrl-Alt-Y, we'll call it key, and we'll apply parameter keyer. You can use whatever keying plugin you would like, but arguably this is the best keyer for this particular case. Selecting the select background button and dragging to select as much of the background I would like to get rid of. And as you can see, it does a brilliant job. I would like to clean the foreground. As you can see, I've lost much of the details in the foreground, so we'll bring that back. And I think we're good to go. Let's add some more color correction. Control Alt Y to create a new adjustment layer, and we'll call it CC. And to it we'll add the Fast CC preset, which, as I can remind you, is levels, curves, and vibrance. We'll bring in the white, and that would really make the leaves glow. The curves is set to a slight S to give a contrast, and the vibrance is again too much, so let's set it to 25, maybe 30. Let's collapse all of these and duplicate the curves, set it to the top of everything, reset it, and I would like to take out some of the red, so I would really end up with a green, luscious green leaves. And let's also bring in some of the green, some of the blue, sorry. From the Regiant Key Create suite, we are going to use the Alpha Cleaner, and that would get rid of any unwanted debris I might still have in the shot. And we'll set it the cleaning mode from both to remove specks. And this pretty much ends the job. Now we'll take the tomato paint 60 frames per second and introduce it to a new composition, and I'll call this one Time Remap Base. And in Time Remap Base I'll introduce back the background, a black solid, rename it to background, and let's move on to the drop and start time remapping. Let's go into the drop folder, open it up, grab on to the drop 60 frames per second composition, make a new composition out of it, rename it to drop time remap, and here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to make sure this composition is set to 25 frames per second. Right click on the layer, go to time, enable time remapping. Let's search for the places where we want the time remap. This is a good point where I would like the time remap to begin. From this point to this point I would like to be slow, and up to this point it can go fast again, and here to here it will go slow once more. So between these two keyframes it will go extremely fast, between these two keyframes it will go slow, fast, slow, and fast again. The fast part would last like 15 frames or so, and the slow part will be 2 seconds. Now when you're messing around with time remapping, you need to make sure you don't reintroduce keyframes in the middle and start dragging them back and forth, because that would pretty much ruin your time track. Make sure you plan ahead before you start time remapping. Let's set the fast middle part to, once again, 10 frames, nothing more than that. And I've lost the end keyframe. There it is. Grab onto those and drag this to the back, and 2 seconds more. And again I lost that final dot, and let's give it 10 more frames. Trim the comp. Okay, so this is my time remap. Fast, slow, fast, and slow. Now the time remap isn't very convincing. It looks a bit erupted. It's not working exactly like it should. I mean, it is time remapping, but it doesn't look too good. To get the most out of your time remapping, we need to go back to the original composition. Go into Composition Settings, Control K, and in the Advanced tab, we have an option to preserve frame rate when nested or in render queue. So we'll mark it, And that means that now, even though this composition is 25 frames per second, this layer still remains at 60 frames per second. And more than that, we need to right-click on all these layers, go to Frame Blending, and right now it's set to off by default. We have Frame Mix and we have Pixel Motion. We need to select Pixel Motion. For the Pixel Motion to take place, we need to mark this little button, Enable Frame Blending. And what Pixel Motion does, it tries to blend frames together, and by that creating sub-frames. At the time remap composition, you can really see it taking place, but for it to really take place, we need to set this layer as well to Frame Blending Pixel Motion, enable Frame Blending button, and last we need to collapse transformation, and now the frames will blend one into another, and you can really see it taking place, how it's blending nicely one into another. Now that we've time remapped, I would like to track it. I'm going to track it in Mocha. I'm no Mocha expert, and fortunately for me, Matthias from MemoWorld has come up with this very useful script called Mocha Import Plus. It really helps get the job done in a very fast way, but with a script or without a script, Mocha doesn't know how to import After Effects compositions. It needs to import footages or sequences. So we need to render out this section. I would highly recommend of rendering it out as a PNG sequence. Oh yeah, before we render it out, there's one more thing I would like to add to the keyframes. Right now the keyframes are very linear, and I don't think that would work that well in the time remap. So what I would like to do is set the first layer to mark the first layer, right click on it, keyframe assistant, and easy ease in. Mark the last layer, easy ease, keyframe assistant, easy ease out. And now mark all 4 pixels in the middle, right click on them, keyframe assistant, easy ease. Now let's switch into graph mode and see how that looks. If we'll zoom in a bit, the easy ease function makes a wavy time remap here. That means at some point I would get back and forth motion, which isn't what I'm looking for at this point. So I would try to straighten up this line as much as possible. So I'll get a straight motion forward. Let's render that out and continue on from there. Okay, so I've rendered out the time remapped section as a PNG sequence. We imported it, and as you can see, I still have all details inside here, and all the frames are blending nicely, all very well. Now I would like to track this footage, and as I said, I'm going to track with Mocha, which is a very powerful feature, and I'm going to use the Mocha Import Plus script by MemoWorld. So I'll just draw a rectangle around the shape I want to track. It doesn't have to be a rectangle, it can be any sort of mask. I'll set it to none. Make sure I'm selecting the layer I want to track, and just hit the Track in Mocha button. I don't need to know anything about Mocha. All I need to know is where's the tracking button, and there it is. Just hit it and let Mocha do its work. So this will be a good time to grab a cup of coffee. Sit down, relax. Okay, so Mocha has finished the track. As you can see, it's a precise track. And I didn't mention this before, but this blue rectangle here is the mask we painted in After Effects. In order to export the data, we need to mark the layer, go into Export Tracking Data, and we need to choose After Effects Transform Data and hit Save. And I'll save this one as tutorial drop time remap data. Let's jump right back to After Effects. This isn't After Effects. In this drop menu, I can choose what kind of track data I'm after. And as I said, I'm after the move. I don't want to corner pin, don't want to stabilize, stabilize pre-comp or create an After Effects track points. I only want to track the movement and the rotation naturally. And I'll hit the load button. In here I've got the track data folder, and here's the file I just saved. Hit OK, and Mocha Import Plus is asking me which clip did you track. Well, I've tracked the .comp time remap track. OK. Make sure I'm not selecting anything and hit apply. That would create a null called Mocha Move Null. This null has all the information here. It's got the rotation, the position, and the scale. I don't really need the scale, so I'll just delete all these keyframes, and I'm left with the rotation and the position. So, as you can see, a very simple process, and we need to repeat this process through all the other compositions. So, go right ahead and do that. I would like to remind you once again, in the 60 frames per second composition, we need to right click on the layer, go to frame blending, pixel motion, enable frame blending. In the composition settings, we need to make sure the preserve frame rate when nested in or in render queue is marked, and the time remap section, make sure the frame blending is set to pixel motion, enable frame blending button is on, and the collapse transformation is marked. So go ahead and time remap all the other sequences, track them, and we'll continue on from that point. Before we go any further, I would like to indicate the exception of the cigarette. The cigarette isn't tracked by Mocha. It's actually a very simple track to do right in After Effects, but I do need the track at the 60 frames per second composition, and that's because I need to track the burn glow. So to do that, I'll create a new null object, Control Alt Shift Y, and we'll call it or track null. The track null should begin at this point, I think. Let's place it here, set a keyframe for it for the precision, and it would end up here. How's the track? Well, as you can see, it's a pretty decent track, right? Very simple. Let's trim the layer so it would start and end at the exact points. This is about the point. Let's connect the burn glow to the track null. And actually, let's go 2 frames before that and move the track null to this point. And once again, 2 frames later, move the track null back. So now we of course need to time remap this section as well. So go ahead and do that, and I'll see you right after that. To save some time, I'm using the time remapped composition of the original composition. It's color corrected a bit different, but the principle remains the same. So let's take a quick preview of how the time remap affects the cigarette. Well, as you can see, the effect here is really noticeable, and it creates quite a very distinct effect. I really like the way this looks. And for example, if I would uncollapse the transformation, we would lose this effect. We still have the time remap, but it's just not working the same. So let's bring that back. To track the tracking box, we first need the tracking data. So let's go in and copy the tracking data, and we need to adjust it a bit here. The tracking data should start at this point, and we'll hit the position button. Let's drag this point here, and yeah, it's a bit too much. Let's drag it here, and at this point it should be here. Let's drag this back. At this point the tracking data should be here, and let's see, at this point the tracking data can be here, and I'm not gonna set the duration any further because at this point the tracking box would disappear. So let's see, we've adjusted the tracking data a bit and it's working good. We need to set this keyframe to easy ease, since I can see it's going to graph mode. Actually, it's hard to see because of the coloring. Let's set the tracking data color to green. Yeah, this is a pretty decent track. Now let's draw our tracking box. We'll select the pen tool and make sure nothing is selected, so we won't draw a mask by accident. By shift clicking, I make sure I'm drawing a straight line, and let's shorten this one up. We don't have any fill, we don't want any, and right now the stroke is set to white and we need to be black, so it would be noticeable. Let's duplicate shape 1, move the anchor point to the corner here, and rotate it. By clicking shift, I'm making sure every turn is 45 degrees, so this is 90 degrees, and just making sure it's in the exact position, and drag it back to somewhere around here. Maybe this one could be a bit closer as well. Okay, now let's mark those two, duplicate them. Once again, move the anchor point to the center here, rotate it 90 degrees, make sure it's straight in the middle. Okay, and let's rotate this one as well. Where's the anchor point? I've lost it. Oh, there it is. Okay, and rotate it. Make sure you're rotating the right layer, and make sure it's in the exact position. Let's mark those two and just drag them down. And there's my tracking box. Let's rename it to track box and connect it to the tracking data. And now my tracking box is tracking the burn glow very nicely. I can see here that it's at some point it's getting lost. So let's mark this keyframe and hit keyframe assistant, right click on it, keyframe assistant easy ease. And yeah, it's tracking it beautifully. Okay, wonderful. Now at this point I would like the tracker to appear, but if you remember from the preview you've seen, the tracker doesn't just fade in or just pop in. It has a sort of a neon popping in kind of thing going on, and here's how we're going to do that. Let's hit T to reveal the opacity, create a keyframe, set it to 0, let's go one frame later, set it to 50, one frame later it will be 25, one frame later it would be 80, one frame later it would be 40, and one frame later it will be 100. So we have a sort of a flickering in animation. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames. I would like to expand it to 7. So I'll go one frame later, mark all of those keyframes, and by alt dragging, these 6 keyframes are lasting for 7 frames. So I sort of have a in-between frame, and I don't want any in-between transitions, so I'll mark all of those, right click on them and hit toggle hold keyframe, and this way I get a flickering in animation going on, and I think it should start earlier, so let's drag all these keyframes here. Maybe around here. This is where it should start. So flickering in. Let's see how that looks. Okay. Now let's move on to the creation of the floating letters and connecting them to the tracking box. For this tutorial's sake, I'm just gonna write, I don't know, my name, Ran. Okay, and I'm using capital letters. I'm using the font I'm using is Typograph Pro Ultralight, and since it's very thin, I've added a slight stroke to it, and at the moment it's white and not very noticeable, so we'll switch it to black, and this is better. Place those in space. So I'm going to convert these letters into 3D layers. I want to wiggle their rotation and position. To do that, I have a very simple and very effective tool, again from MemoWorld, a very lovely little tool called iExpressions, and here's how we're going to use it. Let's start with the position, hit P to reveal the position, and we are going to open up the library, and we are going to we'll go to Wiggles and separate Wiggle 3D. Okay, here's the settings we're going to use. For the X and Y, we'll use 0.3 for the frequency and 0 for the Z, and for the amplitude 25 for the X and Y and 0 for the Z. Mark it, hit apply, and that's it. It's wiggling away, just floating in space on only the X and Y axes. How convenient. Now let's do the same for the rotation. Let's hit R and reset the tool, and we'll set it to 0.2 for the frequency on X, Y and Z, 25 for the amplitude X, Y and Z, and hit apply, and that's it. How easy is that? I want all the letters to have those expressions, so I hit U, mark the position and the orientation, go to edit, copy expression only, and paste, Control V. And now all my layers are floating around in space, and they're rotating in Z space, but not wiggling in Z space, which is exactly what I wanted. But now I would like to connect those letters. Each letter actually. Let's move them down a bit. I want to connect each letter to the center of the tracking box, and actually it's a bit too big. Something like this should be better. And here's how we're going to do that. Let's create a new solid, Control Y, doesn't matter which color, and we'll call it R beam, and we'll apply to it beam, and we'll set the inside color and the outside color to black, set the length to 100, we'll set the softness to 0 and the thickness to 4 or even 3, maybe even 2. Yeah, that's more like it. And last we're going to connect the beam. Let's hit E to reveal the beam effect here, and we'll connect the start point to the center of the tracking box, and once again we are going to use iExpressions for that. We will use SimpleLink 2D. This is what I love about iExpressions. You don't need to know expressions at all. Mark the tracking box, hit P to reveal the position, mark it, and then we'll link it. Now I need to choose what I want to link, and I want to link the starting point. So hit apply, and the starting point has jumped to somewhere in space. Now the reason that happened is that the tracking box is a child of the tracking null, and I would need to connect the starting point to the tracking null's position. So let's reveal the tracking null's position and mark it. Let's reset this expression, link to the position, mark the starting point and apply. And there you go. The starting point is connected to the center of the tracking box. And the ending point will be connected to the position of the R letter. So hit P, mark the position, and we are linking to it, so we'll hit the link button, mark the ending point, and hit apply. Now the ending point has ended up in a not so much desirable place, and that's because the R's anchor point is placed here. So what we need to do is, by hitting Y to get the pen behind tool, we need to move the anchor point to a place where we want it. And now the beam effect is connected to the R, and it follows it wherever it may wiggle, and the ending point is connected to the tracker null and follows it wherever it may go. So let's repeat the process for the other two letters. Let's duplicate this layer 2 times. We'll rename this one to A. So this will be the A beam, and this will be the N beam. Okay, and let's reveal the expression here. The starting point, we have no interest in changing that. And let's see the ending point. Let's load it by hitting load in the I expressions. Okay, let's reset the expression. Hit P to reveal the position. Hit the little link button. Mark the ending point and hit apply. Let's do the same here. Position. Hit U to reveal the expressions. Let's reset the I expression. Mark the position. Hit the link button. Mark ending point and hit apply. And now all we have to do is reset the anchor point, and we are good to go. Let's close this up. And that is looking very nice, if I may say so myself. Now, I would like the letters to flicker in a bit after the tracking box does. So to do that, we'll need to repeat the process we have made to the tracking box. To do that, I have a preset already made called opacity flicker in, and I'll mark all of those, double click on them, and there we go, opacity flicker in. I would like to connect the beam opacity to the letters opacity with an expression, so that if I would change the position of the keyframes, I wouldn't have to do it in 2 layers, only in 1. So let's hit T in the R beam, alt click on the opacity, and pick whip it to the opacity of the R letter. And there you go, they are connected. How beautiful is that? Now let's repeat that process. Hit. And now that everything is connected, let's place them in strategic places. We'll start with the A, that will be here. The R would come back after that, would come in after that, and finally the N. At this point, everything will disappear. Let's hit T here again, copy these keyframes, Control C to copy, Control V to paste, right click on one of those keyframes, keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes, and it's flickering out. Now let's copy these keyframes, mark the A, N, and the tracker box, Control V to paste it, and let's just trim all these layers, and let's see what we've got. Very nice. Well, I'm happy with this result. So finally, all we have left to do is the final composition, and for that I'll actually go back to my original main comp. Now here in the final composition, I have used a simple adjustment layer with the curves that adds a bit more darkness to the edges and some amount of tint to add a nice vignette, and on top of that some footages of light leaks. All these footages are full HD. You can download it for free over at creativedojo.net, where you can find the light leaks pack. The way I use them in my composition is by setting their transfer mode to add or linear dodge, depending on the composition, and it really adds quite a bit to the whole atmosphere of the of this mock-up opening title series that I've created here. And well, folks, that's just about it. and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. It's been a great pleasure hosting it. And once again, my name is Ram Ben Avraham, and I'll see you next time.